Welcome, dear viewers, to the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. From here, we set off today on a journey to touch the very heart of this amazing city. We will stroll down the legendary boulevard Unter den Linden, breathe in the air of history at Gendarmenmarkt and Bebelplatz. People say history is nothing more than the past, but Berlin proves that history is what we live with today. This city has survived wars and division to become what it is now, an incredible metropolis that never forgets who it is. It will be a journey through time, where we will witness the grandeur of German architecture and art that has endured for centuries. You can find the map of the entire route via the link in the video description. There you can also use the timecodes to quickly jump to the sites that interest you during the walk.
East of the Brandenburg Gate lies Platz, where the boulevard Unter den Linden begins. The Brandenburg Gate in Berlin is easily accessible by public transportation. Here you will find the U-Bahn and S-Bahn station Brandenburger Tor. The U5 subway line runs across the city centre, connecting, among other places, Alexanderplatz with Berlin Central Station. The S-Bahn lines S1, S2, S25 and S26 also stop at this station. In addition, bus lines 100, 147, 300, M41 and N5 have stops directly near the gate.
Pariser Platz forms an elegant setting for the Brandenburg Gate. The space feels open and filled with light, like the idea of a city without walls. On one side stands the austere yet harmonious architecture of the French embassy, its soft facade lines and large windows seeming to invite one in, while the flag above the entrance waves to the rhythm of the wind. Opposite is the Embassy of the United States, with modern yet worn forms, its expanses of glass speaking of trust. The absence of tall fences or heavy gates makes the building part of urban life, rather than a sealed fortress. On this square, diplomacy does not appear as an inaccessible bastion, but as an outstretched hand, a symbol that democracy can be open and welcoming.
But on the grand boulevard Unter den Linden, there is another address, the massive Stalinist building of the Russian embassy, erected during the GDR era, rising behind a tall iron fence and additional concrete barriers. Its heavy, monumental facade, the strict symmetry, and the locked gates emphasize distance and coldness. The windows are dark, and the space around it feels cut off from the lively street, like a world of its own behind a silent wall. Strange devices on the roof, drawn curtains. Here, no one wants their dark dealings to be observed. Here, there is fear of free people and the freedom of speech. Here sit the executors of the Kremlin's secret plans under diplomatic protection. From here, Putin's hybrid war against Germany is directed.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine represents a blatant violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. This act of aggression has effectively shattered the peace order established in Potsdam and Yalta in 1945. For the first time since the Second World War, a serious threat has arisen to European security and the international legal order. Billions are being invested in the brazen lies of Kremlin propaganda. To pursue its dirty aims, Russia can employ various instruments: vote buying, cyber attacks, manipulation of information, and paid protests. And all of this is having an effect, even in democratic Europe.
One of the leaders of the party Alternative for Germany, Tino Kruppala, declared that he does not consider Russia an enemy. It is precisely this war rhetoric that we must put an end to, the AfD politician stated in a television interview. In Saxony, Thuringia and Saxony-Anhalt, Kripala's party is classified by the respective state offices for the protection of the constitution as confirmed right-wing extremist. The AfD, known for its contacts with Kremlin power, calls for friendship with Russia and its leader Putin, an aggressor and international war criminal who has shed the blood of millions. The AfD demands that support for Ukraine, which is fighting heroically, be stopped, thereby enabling the Russian army to advance further westward, to destroy democracy and freedom in the countries of Europe. The plans of today's Russia are a continuation of the plans of the Marxist-Leninists to establish a communist dictatorship on a global scale. This is openly written about in various sources, including in the book by Russian ideologue Mikhail Yurev, The Third Empire, Russia as It Should Be, which was reissued in 2019.
But the overwhelming majority of Germany's citizens no longer want a total ideological surveillance state, no communist terror, and no new Berlin walls. Opposite the Russian embassy lies Freedom Square, a small island of light and color, where the blue and yellow flags of Ukraine flutter above flowers and signs of support. Here, exhibitions against the war in Ukraine are held. Photographs, inscriptions, drawings created by people from all over the world. Here, too, the memory of opposition politician Alexei Navalny is honored, one of many dissenters murdered in Russian prisons. Candles, a portrait, fresh flowers, a place where silence speaks louder than any word, and where remembrance and solidarity become a form of resistance.
We continue our tour along the legendary boulevard Unter den Linden, where every avenue represents a page of history. Unter den Linden is one of Berlin's main boulevards, named after the linden trees that adorn it. The boulevard connects the Brandenburg Gate with Museum Island in the heart of Berlin. Originally, the street was laid out in 1573 by Elector Johann Georg as a riding path between the city palace and the Tiergarten. In 1647, Elector Friedrich Wilhelm had it paved and planted with linden trees. The approximately 1.5 kilometer long and 60 meter wide street was developed in several stages between 1674 and 1737. During the German Empire, it transformed from a residential street into a commercial one, with numerous hotels and restaurants. But the boulevard only reached its true splendor under Frederick II, known as Frederick the Great. In his honor, an equestrian statue stands at the eastern end of the street.
Near the Unter den Linden subway station, we see the Microsoft office. Here we need to turn right into Charlottenstrasse, and after about 500 meters, we reach the most beautiful square in Berlin, the Gendarmenmarkt.
And now we step out onto the wide square where the symmetrical harmony of the architecture unfolds before us, so perfect that it seems as if someone had carefully arranged these buildings on the chessboard of history. This symmetry and thoughtful layout embody the ideals of classicism, order, balance, and beauty. Two majestic domes appear to mirror one another, and between them stands, like a conductor, the elegant building of the concert hall. This is the Gendarmenmarkt, one of the most beautiful squares not only in Berlin, but in all of Europe. The square was laid out at the end of the 17th century by order of Elector Friedrich III of Brandenburg. At first it was called the Esplanade and formed part of the new district of Friedrichstadt. Later, the barracks of an elite cavalry regiment, the gendarmes, were built here, which gave the square its present name. In the 18th century, according to the plans of architect Karl von Gontard, the two magnificent twin churches were erected, the French Cathedral in honor of the French Huguenots, and the German Cathedral for the German congregation. Later, in the 19th century, Karl Friedrich Schinkel built the concert hall, then a theater between them, thus completing the square's famous symmetry.
The French Cathedral is a monument of history and architecture and reflects an important part of the city's past. At the end of the 17th century, after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in France, thousands of French Protestants, Huguenots, were forced to flee religious persecution. Elector Friedrich Wilhelm of Brandenburg issued the Edict of Potsdam, inviting them into his lands and granting them freedom of religion as well as civil rights. The Huguenot community, which at the time made up about a quarter of Berlin's population, began building its own church. It was constructed between 1701 and 1705, according to the plans of Louis Caillat and Abraham Quenet, modeled after the destroyed Huguenot church in Charenton-Saint-Maurice, France. Originally, the church had no dome. This was only added later in 1785 by order of King Frederick II. The architect responsible was Karl von Gontard. The dome was built to complete the architectural symmetry of the Gendarmenmarkt, where the German Cathedral already stood with a similar dome. The original building, erected for the Huguenots, was in the Baroque style. The later additions, the dome, porticos, and columns, are in the neoclassical style. It is precisely these elements that give the structure its present majestic appearance. The French cathedral is a shining symbol of religious tolerance, as practiced by the Prussian rulers. It bears witness to how Berlin welcomed and integrated a large number of refugees, who made a significant contribution to the city's economic and cultural development.
The German Cathedral was built for Berlin's Lutheran congregation. Construction took place between 1701 and 1708, according to the plans of architect Martin Grunberg. This building was originally designed as the symmetrical counterpart to the French Cathedral, which had been built for the Huguenots. As with the French Cathedral, the dome here was added only later. Between 1780 and 1785, King Frederick II commissioned architect Karl von Gontard to add a dome tower to the existing church. The aim was to create an architectural ensemble on Gendarmenmarkt, modeled after Rome's Piazza del Popolo. During the Second World War, in 1943, the German cathedral was severely damaged by fire. For a long time, it remained a ruin, until its complete restoration between 1982 and 1996. The original church by Martin Grunberg was built in the Baroque style. The dome tower, added by Karl von Gontard, however, is designed in the neoclassical style. Today, the German cathedral no longer serves a religious function, but an educational one. Since 2002, it has housed an exhibition of the German Bundestag on the path of German democracy, from the first tentative parliaments in 1848 up to the present day. And when you lift your eyes to its dome, it seems as if this stone giant whispers, history is not only what has been, but also what we are still to write.
The concert hall building stands on the site of the Court and National Theatre, which was destroyed by fire in 1817. Between 1818 and 1821, the famous German architect Karl Friedrich Schinkel created a new royal theatre in the austere neoclassical style, inspired by the architecture of ancient Greece. The theatre was ceremoniously opened on June 18, 1821, with the world premiere of Karl Maria von Weber's opera Der Freischütz. In terms of acoustics, the concert hall ranks among the 5 best classical halls in the world. Inside stands a magnificent organ with 4 manuals. Within the hall, the space seems to float above the sound. The acoustics are so perfect that the notes seem to linger in the air for a moment. Here, music is given a voice, the building a soul, and time a meaning.
The beautiful marble monument to Friedrich Schiller on the Gendarmenmarkt complements the architectural ensemble in an ideal way. The sculptor Reinhold Begas, a leading representative of the Berlin School of Monumental Sculpture in the 19th century, created the monument in the neo-Baroque style. The solemn unveiling took place on November 10, 1871, Schiller's 112th birthday. The monument is made of white marble and depicts Schiller crowned with a laurel wreath, his face bearing a concentrated and inspired expression. The figure rises on a cubic pedestal surrounded by 4 semicircular basins with lion fountains. On the sides of the basins stand 4 allegorical female figures representing the main fields of Schiller's work: lyric poetry with a swan harp, tragedy with a dramatic mask, philosophy with the ancient Greek inscription "Know thyself," and history with a tablet naming prominent figures such as Lessing, Kant, and Goethe alongside Schiller. The pedestal also features 2 reliefs, one showing Schiller receiving the lyre from the Muses, and another depicting him presenting himself to the great predecessors. It is the first public monumental representation of the poet in Berlin, a work that underscores both Schiller's cultural stature and the importance of poetry in shaping German national identity.
The next sites we should definitely visit in this quarter are 2 magnificent and famous churches, the Friedrichswerder Church and St. Hedwig's Cathedral. After that, we will return to Unter den Linden. Now, from the Schiller Monument, we walk toward the French Cathedral, turn right into Jägerstrasse, and after about 10 minutes, we reach the small square called Gendarmenmarkt. Here we see the bear fountain in front of the Federal Foreign Office and the beautiful neo-Gothic church built of red brick.
This is the mysterious and inspiring Friedrichswerder Church. It stands on a narrow island off the city, the so-called Werder, like an ancient hut between the young residential quarters. At dusk, its pointed towers gaze down on the city like guardians. The red brick appears alive, infused with the romantic spirits of neo-Gothic, yet at the same time filled with the cool clarity of classical discipline, a subtle crossing of 2 eras. Carl Friedrich Schinkel, the master of classicism, was commissioned by Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm IV to build a church in the medieval style. He hesitated, thinking of strict antique forms, but in the end he relented. Thus, a unique hybrid came into being: classical proportions and Gothic expressiveness. Schinkel himself wrote that he wished to purify the Gothic through antiquity. Following his designs, a brick fortress church arose, a cubic structure closed in Gothic, yet one in which classicism continues to live on: clear lines, balanced proportions, restrained motifs.
The solemn consecration of Berlin's first neo-Gothic church, the Friedrichswerder Church, took place in 1831. In the 20th century, it was destroyed during the bombings of the Second World War and stood as a ruin for a long time. It was only between 1982 and 1987 that it was rebuilt, even preserving details of the interior: the altar, stained glass, and tombs. The church was reopened, this time as a branch of the National Gallery. Today, its spacious and light-filled nave houses sculptures of the 19th century, works by Shadow, Rauch, Tieck, and others.
Inside, the references to Gothic models are more clearly recognizable than in the building's outward form. Slim, clustered buttresses with fine profiles rise up into illusionistic net vaults on the high ceiling. This illusion was created through painted ribs and artfully drawn shadows. In reality, it is a ribbed groin vault. Schinkel had the brick masonry of the vaults painted and the pillars designed to appear as if they were carved from sandstone. Snow-white walls, paintings imitating marble, nets of Gothic ribs that cleverly pretend to be real. All this is the highest theatricality of architecture.
The Gothic ribs are the supporting elements of the vault skeleton, typical of the Gothic style. The ceiling of a Gothic cathedral is not simply a massive stone dome, but rather resembles a net, a branching of tree limbs interwoven above our heads. These branches are the ribs. The incoming light from the church windows and the dark shadows of the ribs create a mystical atmosphere. Schinkel's voice can be heard here in every arch and in every fresco. Passing through the arch, the vast space of the hall opens up. The air here feels ancient, filled with the courage of brick and the whisper of sculptures. This is a place where architecture speaks the language of Gothic, while classicism softly wispies in the background. The centuries-old walls preserve the memory of all that has been lived, of war and destruction, and at the same time, of the eternal striving for beauty and perfection.
Just 5 minutes from the Friedrichswerder Church lies St. Hedwig's Cathedral.
St. Hedwig's Cathedral is a Roman Catholic church on Bebelplatz. It is the cathedral of the Archdiocese of Berlin, and thus the city's highest-ranking Roman Catholic church. Imagine Berlin in the 18th century, a pronounced Protestant city opening its doors to a faith that for centuries had remained on the margins here. It was precisely at this time, under the patronage of King Frederick the Great of Prussia, that construction began in 1747 on a circular house of worship, the first Catholic church in Berlin after the Reformation. The building was inspired by the architecture of the Roman Pantheon and designed by architect Georg Wenceslaus von Knobelsdorff. Frederick the Great wanted to show Europe that Prussia was a state of tolerance. For him, it was an important signal to the Catholic powers, including Austria and France. We grant our subjects freedom of religion.
Construction dragged on. The 7 Years' War, lack of funds, all this made the church appear like an unfinished circle opening toward the sky. In 1773, however, thanks to donations from Rome and with the support of the king, the dome was completed and the church was consecrated. Later, in the 19th century, architect Max Hassack gave the dome permanence by cladding it in copper, adding a lantern dome and completing the reliefs and sculptures, thus granting the dome its majesty and completeness. During the Second World War, St. Hedwig's Cathedral was severely damaged in 1944. After the war, it was rebuilt, and between 2018 and 2024, it underwent a new redesign. This most recent transformation, which reinterpreted the interior, was completed at the end of 2024.
At the center stands the new domed altar, formed from thousands of small stones, among them fragments of the Berlin Wall. These are stones brought by people carrying their memories and their hopes. The altar stands directly beneath the opening of the dome and embodies the union of heaven and earth, of eternity and faith. The altar is surrounded by a bright, almost ethereal interior, white, airy, inviting quiet contemplation. St. Hedwig's Cathedral is a witness to peace and destruction, to triumph and spiritual growth. It is a mysterious guardian in whose round dome the traces of entire generations' hands are preserved, while inside resounds a silence filled with tears and prayers, with fear and light. In this church, meanings come alive, the freedom of faith, the strength of community, the hope of renewal. And all this is united in the radiant circle of the altar.
When we leave St. Hedwig's Cathedral, we arrive at the western part of Bebelplatz. This is one of the most famous and historically significant squares in Berlin. It was designed in the 18th century during the reign of Frederick the Great. At its center rises the majestic building of the State Opera. To the east of the opera lies a green space, a small park with sculptures and cafes. To the west of the opera opens a wide area with the historic building of the old library, which today belongs to the Faculty of Law of the university.
The square is especially known as the site of the book burnings of May 10, 1933, when the National Socialists burned the works of authors whose ideas they considered false or dangerous. Today, the square is home to a memorial by Micha Ullmann, a glass panel set into the pavement through which one looks down into an underground white room with empty bookshelves. They symbolize the books that were lost.
Originally, the square was called Opernplatz, named after the opera house located here, today's State Opera Unter den Linden. The State Opera is not only a house of music, but a temple, whose walls even today seem to feel the rustling dresses of courtly ladies, and the first breath of the orchestra, in those moments when Frederick the Great himself gazed from the royal boxes. Its facade is austere, yet graceful, like a score in which not a single note is superfluous. The architect of the opera house on Bebelplatz was Georg Wenceslaus von Knobelsdorff, the chief builder of Frederick II and one of the leading representatives of Prussian Baroque. Between 1741 and 1743, he designed the opera as part of a unified architectural ensemble of the square. For the mid-18th century, Knobelsdorff's project was bold and unusual.
What was special at the time was that theaters were usually hidden within palace complexes and accessible only to the nobility. Knobelsdorff, however, placed the opera house directly on the street as a freestanding building. In this way, its facade became a true architectural face of the city. Instead of heavy Baroque ornamentation, he chose lighter, classically balanced forms. For Berlin, which was still inclined towards splendid Baroque, this appeared fresh and modern. Frederick II wanted to emphasize that the opera should not be reserved for the elite alone, but should become a symbol of the cultural capital of Prussia. That is why its facade faces the main boulevard and not the courtyard of a palace. In the evening, when the lantern light falls upon the columns, the building seems to lift slightly from the ground, as if ready to rise into the air with the rhythm of an overture. And in the silence of the square, even when it stands empty, the echo of applause still lingers, a sound that closes over the centuries like the lid of an old piano.
From Bebelplatz, the view opens onto the majestic historic building of Humboldt University. Once, in the mid-18th century, Prince Heinrich of Prussia, the brother of Frederick the Great, desired a palace, bright and austere, yet with the elegance that Baroque architecture brings forth. Architect Johann Baumann raised the facade in solemn proportions, adorned it with pilasters and a gentle rhythm of windows. Through the wide-open gates, carriages once drove in, and across the stairways echoed the crystalline laughter of courtly ladies.
At the beginning of the 19th century, everything changed. The palace became a house of knowledge. Its halls no longer resounded with courtly receptions, but with lectures, and in place of the intrigues of high society came scientific debates. Here, the Royal Berlin University moved in and inscribed the future into old walls. Since 1949, it has borne the name of the Humboldt brothers, Wilhelm and Alexander, two outstanding German figures of the 19th century who left a profound mark on science and culture. Wilhelm von Humboldt, philosopher, linguist, diplomat, and educational reformer, was co-founder of the Berlin University in 1809 to 1810. He developed its concept, the union of research and teaching, academic freedom, and the development of personality through education. His monument, created by sculptor Paul Otto, can be seen to the left in front of the building.
Alexander von Humboldt, the famous naturalist, traveler, and geographer, gained renown through his expeditions to South America, Siberia, and Central Asia, as well as through his foundational works in the natural sciences. His monument, created by Weinhold Begas, can be seen to the right of the university building. At the beginning of the 20th century, the palace received two extensions, so that the building's floor plan came to resemble the letter H, a subtle allusion to the name of the Humboldt brothers. Then came the war. Cracks split the facades, the roofs collapsed. It was only in the 1960s that the building rose again from the ruins, steadfastly preserving its face. On its cornices and gates, 8 sculptures from the destroyed Potsdam Palace found their place, silent wanderers who discovered a new home in a foreign house.
In the courtyard in front of the university building stands the monument to Hermann von Helmholtz, the eminent German physicist and physician of the 19th century. Humboldt University can truly be called a cradle of intellectual power. Here studied or taught some of the greatest minds of humanity, whose legacy continues to inspire the world to this day. Albert Einstein, Max Planck, Robert Koch, Otto von Bismarck, the brothers Grimm, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Arthur Schopenhauer, Heinrich Heine, Felix Mendelssohn, and many others.
Next to the university building stands the State Library Unter den Linden. Its building, constructed between 1903 and 1914, according to the plans of Ernst von Ihne, in the neo-Baroque style, is an architectural monument. It is one of the two main buildings of the Berlin State Library. The second is located on Potsdamer Straße, which we have already looked at in another film. The State Library Unter den Linden is one of the largest buildings in Berlin, and at the same time, one of the most important libraries in the world.
In the eastern part of Berlin's boulevard, Unter den Linden, we see the majestic equestrian statue of Frederick the Great, the old Fritz. His horse halts mid-step, as if listening to the murmur of the centuries, while the rider, in tricorn hat and with a cane in hand, looks forward, as though he were gazing not only at the street, but at an entire epoch he himself created. The creator of this bronze masterpiece was Christian Daniel Rauch, an artist who succeeded in casting into the metal not only the portrait of the monarch, but also the very breath of Prussian history. He worked on the statue of the king for more than 10 years, from the first sketches in 1839 until its solemn unveiling in May 1851. Frozen in bronze, here is not only the face of Frederick II, but also his soldierly bearing, the art of wielding power gently, yet unshakably.
The massive pedestal is adorned with reliefs and figures. Here are gathered 74 of the king's most prominent contemporaries: generals, philosophers, diplomats, poets. There stands Immanuel Kant, bent thoughtfully over a book. Here we see Lessing, as if he had just paused in a debate. And right beside him, the stern commanders, accustomed to deciding the fate of battles with a single gesture of the hand. At the base of the granite pedestal are bronze inscriptions. Above them, allegorical representations of the virtues that, in the sculptor's vision, accompanied Frederick: wisdom, bravery, justice, moderation. Every figure, every fold of the garments, every strand of the horse's mane is cast with such care, as if Rauch knew that this monument would outlive even the very streets on which it stands.
The 20th century did not spare Berlin, yet the old Fritz endured. During the war, he was encased in a concrete shell, and in the post-war years of the GDR, he was taken to Potsdam. It was not until 1980 that the Bronze King returned to his boulevard, returned to once again greet the sunrises and sunsets over Unter den Linden. Today, this monument is not only a tribute to memory, it is a frozen march of time in which power, culture, and military glory merge into a single image. And as you walk past, you can almost hear the horse's bridle clinking and Frederick the Great softly saying, "Onward, forward, always forward."
We continue our walk eastward along Unter den Linden, where almost every building bears its centuries-old history and reflects the spirit and identity of the German people. Nearby stands the Neue Wache, the former royal guardhouse. This building was erected in 1818, according to the designs of Karl Friedrich Schinkel, serving both as a guardhouse for the royal guard and as a memorial to those who fell in the Napoleonic Wars. Despite its comparatively modest size, the architect succeeded in giving it monumentality through clear forms, a powerful risalit, and a strict Doric portico. Since 1993, the Neue Wache has served as the central memorial of the Federal Republic of Germany for the victims of war and tyranny. In the same year, the moving sculpture Mother with Her Dead Son, also called the Pieta, by the great sculptor Käthe Kollwitz, was placed in the otherwise empty interior. On the gable of the portico, the goddess of victory is depicted.
The Zeughaus, the former Berlin Arsenal, is the oldest surviving building on the boulevard Unter den Linden, and was built in the Baroque style. The arsenal was constructed between 1695 and 1706, based on designs by the architects Johann Arnold Nering, Martin Grunberg, Andreas Schluter, and Jean de Bott. Originally, the building served as an artillery arsenal for storing the cannons of Brandenburg and Prussia. The facade facing Unter den Linden shows a strict compositional structure in the spirit of classicism, yet its Baroque character is emphasized by rich relief decorations and sculptures. This combination of severity and decorative abundance draws the eye and creates a solemn impression. At the main portal, King Frederick I of Prussia is depicted, his coat of arms carried by two goddesses of victory. Running along the entire roof is a balustrade crowned with sculptures, stylized representations of warriors in helmets and armor.
On both sides of the main entrance stand four allegorical female figures symbolizing the sciences and arts, such as arithmetic, geometry, engineering, and pyrotechnics, knowledge essential to artillery. After German reunification, the German Historical Museum was opened here. In 2003, a modern exhibition pavilion was added next to the historic building, designed by I.O. Ming Pei and connected to the Zeughaus by a passageway. The Zeughaus is not only an architectural jewel of the Baroque, but also a symbol of Berlin's historical transformations from arsenal to centre of national memory culture. It embodies a layered history, from Prussian military power to a museum space of the 20th and 21st centuries.
The Berlin Art Market on the banks of the Spree, next to the Historical Museum and opposite Museum Island, is one of the city's oldest and best-known art markets. For more than 25 years, both local and international artists have presented and sold their works at this historic site. The exhibits include art objects, handicrafts, and design. From unique handmade pieces to original designer works, the selection is colorful and diverse. Individual paintings, graphics, photographs, handmade accessories, and Berlin souvenirs offer priests and culture lovers a varied encounter with the Berlin Art Market at Museum Island. It takes place all year round, in summer as well as in winter.
Dear friends, with this we conclude our tour of Unter den Linden Boulevard, Gendarmenmarkt and Bebelplatz. These are places imbued with the traces of momentous events of both past and present. We have accompanied you on a spiritual journey through Berlin, where every stone carries history and every work of art preserves the soul of its creator. Our film is not just an excursion, but an attempt to understand and to feel the spirit of an era. May our journeys also be an inspiration for you. Discover Europe, conquering the heart and lifting the imagination. In every image, filled with history, art, and architectural splendor.